When I took the night shift at St. Augustine Medical Center in rural Texas, I thought it was a blessing. The pay was generous, the hours oddly perfect, and the hospital was quiet, almost too quiet. I didn't think much of it at first. Nurses came and went like ghosts themselves, faces tight with exhaustion, never quite meeting your eyes. They didn't warn me, not directly at least. Maybe they weren't allowed to. Or maybe they'd learned it was better to let new hires figure it out for themselves. My first night I arrived early. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered cars under flickering lights. The hospital sat like a tombstone against the dark horizon, a monolith of concrete and cold windows. A single security guard nodded to me at the entrance, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He didn't speak, just buzzed me in and pointed down the hall. I followed the signs to the nurse's station on the 3rd floor. The elevator creaked with every floor it passed. When the doors opened, the corridor was dimly lit. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and the hum of machines filled the air like background static. At the station, an older nurse greeted me. Her name tag said Karen, and her eyes darted behind me as if expecting something to come lurching out of the shadows. "You're the new night nurse?" she asked. I nodded. She handed me a laminated sheet of paper. "These are the rules. Read them. Memorize them. Don't question them." I glanced down at the paper. The list was short, 10 rules in bold type. The tone wasn't playful or cautionary. It was matter-of-fact, as if someone had typed them with shaking hands but iron discipline. 1. Never speak to room 304. 2. If you hear a lullaby after midnight, do not investigate. Lock yourself in the medicine room. 3. The man with the hat in the east wing is not a doctor. Do not follow him. 4. If a patient checks in after 2:33 a.m., call security immediately. 5. Avoid the mirrors in the hallway between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. 6. If the power goes out, sit still and close your eyes, no matter what you hear. 7. Never touch the wheelchair in the west hallway. 8. Do not respond if someone calls your name from the elevator shaft. 9. If you see a little girl in a blue hospital gown, give her a lollipop and walk away. 10. Leave the building before sunrise. No exceptions. I stared at the list, unsure whether it was a twisted prank or some kind of dark tradition. Karen's expression was grim. "You think it's a joke," she said. We all did, at first. I opened my mouth to ask questions, but she raised a hand to stop me. "You'll see. Just follow the rules. I'm transferring to day shift starting tomorrow. I won't be here again." And with that, she handed me the keys to the medicine cabinet and left. That night started off quiet, almost peaceful. I made my rounds, checked vitals, restocked supplies. Most of the patients were elderly, sedated, or in comas. A few nurses floated about, but they rarely spoke more than a few words. Their eyes avoided mine, like I carried something they didn't want to catch. Around midnight, I heard something strange, a soft humming sound echoing faintly through the halls. At first, I thought it was just a machine or maybe the wind outside. But then the melody became clear. A lullaby, a familiar haunting tune that seemed to drift closer with every second. My heart thudded in my chest. The rules. I sprinted to the medicine room, fumbling with the key. The humming grew louder, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. I locked the door behind me, pressed my back to the cabinet, and slid to the floor. The room was cold, unnaturally so. I heard footsteps outside, small ones, bare feet, like a child walking slowly just beyond the door. Then a knock. 3 gentle taps. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Silence followed. Eventually the humming faded. The air grew warmer. I waited another 10 minutes before unlocking the door and stepping out. The hallway was empty. That was the moment I stopped doubting the rules. The rest of the night passed without further incident, but my nerves were shot. Every time I walked past a mirror, I kept my head down. Every time I heard footsteps, I tensed. The next night, I arrived again. Still no Karen. No one explained the list. No one mentioned the lullaby. It was as though nothing had happened. Around 2:15 a.m., I was near the east wing, checking patient records on a tablet. The corridor was dim. Lights flickered above me. That's when I saw him. A tall man in an old-fashioned doctor's coat. His back was to me. He stood motionless outside room 312, head tilted to one side, as if listening. I opened my mouth to ask if he needed anything, but then I remembered the rule. The man with the hat in the east wing is not a doctor. Do not follow him. And there it was. The hat. A wide-brimmed, dusty thing that didn't belong to any modern uniform. He turned slightly, and I saw part of his face. Gaunt. Pale. His eyes were bottomless pits, and his smile looked like it had been carved into his flesh. I froze. He stepped into the room. I turned and walked the other way, not running, not breathing, not looking back. I returned to the nurse's station and waited the rest of the hour, watching the clock like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Around 3:10 a.m., I had to pass the hallway with mirrors. I remembered the rule. Avoid the mirrors in the hallway between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. But this was the only path to room 206, where a patient's monitor had triggered an alert. I took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to glance left or right. But the mirrors, they whispered. Not audibly, not like speech, but with presence. The feeling of being watched, of faces moving just out of sync with your body. One of them cracked faintly as I passed. Not from pressure, not from damage, like it shivered. The patient in 206 was fine. False alarm. As I returned, I caught something in the corner of my vision. My reflection didn't move as I did. It stood still, watching. Its mouth opened into a scream I couldn't hear. I closed my eyes and rushed past it. By 4 a.m., I was back in the supply closet, breathing hard, knuckles white around the clipboard I hadn't realized I'd been clutching. I wanted to leave. I wanted to quit. But the money, the silence of the night, the strange sense of purpose, they kept me grounded. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this hospital was alive. Not in the warm, healing way. No, it breathed cold into your bones and pressed its secrets against your skin like a second layer. On the third night, something changed. At 2:33 a.m. sharp, the front doors buzzed. A patient arrived. A man, unconscious, bleeding from the head, brought in by an EMT who looked shaken. There was no 911 call, he said. He was just lying there in the parking lot. No ID, no vehicle. I checked the time. If a patient checks in after 2:33 a.m., call security immediately. I picked up the phone, but the line was dead. The EMT was already gone. The man on the stretcher opened his eyes and smiled. Not a grateful smile, not a dazed one. It was something else, too wide, too perfect, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And his eyes, they were pitch black. Not dark brown, not shadowed, completely, utterly black, like ink spilled on glass. I stepped back. His body hadn't moved, but I felt something shift in the room, like the pressure had changed, like the hospital itself was holding its breath. He blinked slowly and tilted his head at me. "You called me," he said. His voice was soft, almost melodic, but wrong. It didn't echo properly. It was like hearing a voice underwater. "I didn't," I whispered. "You did," he said, still smiling. "I heard it in your bones." I reached for the panic button on the wall. Nothing. The red light didn't flash. The stretcher creaked. He was sitting up now, still watching me, still smiling. I turned and ran out of the room, down the hall, past the mirrors, past the elevator shaft. I didn't stop until I reached the security office on the first floor. The door was open. The room was empty. The monitor screens were all off except one. It showed a live feed of room 204. My reflection was standing there. Only I wasn't. I was here, and the version of me on the screen was smiling back. I shut the monitor off and slammed the door behind me. That was the first night I broke the rules. I didn't call security fast enough. I made it through the rest of the shift by locking myself in the break room and waiting out the hours, but something followed me home. I could feel it in my apartment like static in the air. My phone rang 3 times between sunrise and noon, but each time I answered, no one spoke. I kept hearing that lullaby too, faint and far away. Still, I went back. I told myself it was a stress reaction, a waking nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But deep down, I knew the hospital was bleeding into my life. It had marked me. On my 5th night, a new nurse joined the shift. Her name was Elisa. Early 20s, bright eyes, fresh from nursing school. Poor girl didn't know what she was walking into. I tried to warn her subtly. I handed her a copy of the rules, just like Karen did for me. She read them and laughed. "You're joking, right?" I didn't laugh with her. Later that night, I saw her standing at the end of the hallway, the one with the mirrors. She was staring into one. Her reflection wasn't moving. "Elisa," I called. "Don't look at it." She didn't respond. I ran toward her and yanked her away from the glass. Her body was ice cold, and her pupils were blown wide. She was mumbling something. "He said I'm beautiful in there." I dragged her to the break room and locked the door. She trembled for over an hour. I made her tea, tried to talk to her. She didn't blink once. When dawn came, she left without speaking another word. She never came back. I asked about her the next night, but none of the nurses remembered her. Not even the head nurse who had processed her ID. It was like she had been erased. The hospital had a way of doing that. Later that shift, while restocking supplies, I made the mistake of walking down the west hallway, the one with the wheelchair. It sat there under a flickering light, old, rusted. The vinyl seat torn at the edges, I stared at it. Something about it pulled at me, like gravity. I took a single step closer. A cold breath touched the back of my neck. I froze. The air behind me shifted, and in the corner of my vision, I saw a shadow lean forward. It whispered something in a language I didn't understand. I stepped back from the chair. Slowly, the whispering stopped. Later, I asked one of the older janitors about the west hallway. He looked at me with dead eyes. "You touched it?" "No," I said, "but I almost did. Don't go near it again, not unless you want to push someone that isn't there for the rest of your life." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. By my sixth night, I had memorized the rules like scripture. I followed every one of them like my life depended on it, because it did. At 3:44 a.m., I heard the elevator doors open. I wasn't expecting anyone. No patients were scheduled, and no one had buzzed the entrance. I walked toward the elevator shaft slowly, my flashlight flickering in my hand. Then I heard it. My name, soft, sweet, a perfect imitation of my mother's voice. "Emily," it said. "Please help me. I'm stuck." The voice echoed up from the darkness of the elevator pit. I backed away immediately. "Do not respond if someone calls your name from the elevator shaft." It called again, crying this time, begging. I turned and walked away. It screamed behind me, inhuman, shrill, and furious. I didn't look back. At 4:50 a.m., I made my way to the exit. I always left before sunrise. The last rule was the most important one. Leave the building before sunrise. No exceptions. But as I passed room 304, I heard sobbing. That room had always been empty. Or at least, that's what I'd been told. And then I remembered the first rule. Never speak to room 304. I ignored the crying. My heart ached, but I didn't stop. As I reached the lobby, the little girl was standing there, the one in the blue hospital gown. She looked up at me with large, glassy eyes. "I'm hungry," she whispered. I reached into my pocket and handed her a cherry lollipop. She took it with small, pale fingers and skipped away into the shadows. The sky outside was bleeding into orange. I pushed through the doors and stepped into the parking lot, lungs full of morning air. I had survived. For now. But each night was worse. Each shift more twisted than the last. And I couldn't quit. Not yet. Because I had broken a rule. And something new. Something was waiting. I didn't sleep the next day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man on the stretcher, the one who smiled without blinking and spoke like he lived inside my bones. His voice echoed in the corners of my apartment, even when there was no sound. I unplugged my TV, turned off the fan, even shut off the fridge. But the humming never stopped. It was like the hospital had followed me home. I stared at the rules again. I had them printed and pinned above my desk now. Each one felt like a thread barely holding my life together. And I had broken one. The rule about calling security when someone checks in after 2:33 a.m., and I hadn't seen security since. That night, when I returned for my 7th shift, something was different. The hospital was darker. Not just dim, darker, like the walls were absorbing light. The lobby lights flickered slower. The air felt thick, as if I were walking through fog I couldn't see. When I reached the nurse's station, there was no one there. No head nurse, no records clerk, no voices on the intercom. I checked the schedule. 3 nurses were supposed to be working that shift with me, but the list was blank. Just my name, printed at the top. No one else. I stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. Then I saw it, taped to the computer monitor, a sticky note. "He knows you now." There was no name, no signature, just that message, written in rushed, slanted handwriting. I tore it down and threw it away. But the words didn't leave me. I could feel them pressing against the back of my skull like they were branded there. I started my rounds. The silence in the hospital was unbearable. No machines beeped. No phones rang. The elevators didn't hum. I passed the east wing and felt eyes on me, but the hallway was empty. The man with the hat wasn't there. Not yet. At 1:48 a.m., I passed the elevator shaft again. My name echoed up from the pit, whispered softly, followed by a low chuckle. I ignored it. I made it to the third floor, where I noticed something that hadn't been there before. All the clocks were wrong. Each one was stuck on 2:33 a.m. Every single one. I checked my watch. 2:10 a.m. I blinked, looked again. 2:33 a.m. I turned it over in my hand, tried to reset it. Nothing worked. That time, 2:33 was burned into everything. Phones, monitors, even the patient vitals machines. It was as if the hospital itself had frozen in that moment. I passed room 306 and saw a figure standing inside, behind the glass. A man in scrubs, but his head was cocked to one side at an unnatural angle, like his neck had been snapped and left hanging. He waved. I kept walking. Then I reached the hallway with the mirrors. I didn't have to pass through it this time, but something about it called to me. The lights were all out down that stretch. I could only see my reflection in the nearest panel. And it was smiling again. I wasn't. It lifted a hand and waved. I didn't. I stepped back slowly. My reflection kept smiling. Its teeth looked too sharp now. As I turned away, I heard it laugh, soft, high-pitched like glass cracking. I reached the supply closet and locked myself in, breathing hard. My walkie crackled. It hadn't worked in days, but now at 3 a.m., it hissed to life. Emily, the voice was my own. I'm so tired. Why won't you come help me? I dropped the device. It kept speaking, static rising in the background like a storm. I'm still down here, trapped. You left me. I kicked it across the room. Silence returned. But then came the knock on the supply closet door. 3 slow knocks, then a pause, then 2 more. I pressed myself into the corner, flashlight off, heart hammering in my chest. Whoever was outside didn't move. Then I heard dragging footsteps moving down the hall and the soft scrape of something metal. I waited a long time before opening the door. The hallway was empty, but a trail of red led away from the closet and vanished into the darkness near the elevators. I didn't follow it. I went back to the nurses' station. The lights there were brighter, safer. There was a note waiting for me again. Same handwriting. It's not the hospital that's haunted. It's the night itself. My hand shook. Something had changed. I could feel it inside me now, like some parasite of fear had buried itself behind my ribs. At 4:12 a.m., I returned to the west hallway by mistake. I didn't realize where I was until I heard the creaking. The wheelchair was moving, rolling slowly down the corridor. No one was in it. I pressed myself flat against the wall. The chair rolled past me, then stopped, then turned. It faced me now. The air dropped 10 degrees. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was gone. That morning, I didn't make it to the exit in time. The sun had started to rise, barely, just a hint of light cracking the sky. I was about to reach the door when a voice behind me whispered, "You're too late." The hospital groaned, the windows shook, and everything went dark, just for a moment. When the lights came back, the lobby was different, older, faded. Dust, the walls had cracks, the chairs were dusty. The reception desk was broken. I turned back toward the hallway. The layout had changed. The nurse's station was gone. So were the mirrors, and the doors now had rusted metal numbers like from a different era entirely. The hospital had changed. I wasn't in the St. Augustine Medical Center I knew anymore. I was somewhere else, some older version of it. Something underneath. A whisper drifted through the air, faint as a breath. "You stayed too long." The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the usual kind of silence in a hospital at night. This was thick, suffocating, alive in its own way. There was no hum of electricity, no soft beeping of machines, no whispers of voices over radios or intercoms. Even my own footsteps sounded wrong, muffled, like I was walking through something that didn't want me to be heard or remembered. The building around me was no longer the sterile, modern structure I had known. The walls were cracked, discolored by time and damp rot. Fluorescent lights flickered above me, but cast no real warmth. The floor tiles were stained with something that looked too old to identify, too dark to be anything but forgotten pain. My name badge was missing. I didn't remember dropping it. The clock at the front desk still read 2:33 a.m. I couldn't tell if time was frozen or if it had been rewound. I tried to retrace my steps back to the entrance, but the lobby doors were gone, replaced by a brick wall, seamless as if they'd never existed. Even the air tasted older, dust, iron, and something fouler underneath, like decay soaked into the building's lungs. I wasn't in the hospital anymore. Or maybe I was. Maybe this was what the hospital really was when you broke the rules and stayed too long. I gripped the flashlight tighter and moved forward. The rules. I clung to them now like scripture. Even here, especially here, I had to follow them, even if the rooms had changed and the ghosts were louder. I took the east corridor. The mirrors were gone, replaced by boarded windows that looked out into nothing. No sky, no stars, no lights. Just a thick gray fog pressing against the glass like a waiting thing. Halfway down the corridor, I heard the sound. Wheels, rusted, groaning. The wheelchair. I ducked into a storage room just before it rolled past, empty as before, moving as if pushed by invisible hands. The storage room smelled of mildew and medicine. Shelves held outdated supplies, glass syringes, jars of leeches, bloodied gauze from another time. But tucked between two boxes was a notebook, leather-bound, thick with age. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly like a beating heart. I flipped it open. Inside were names, pages and pages of them, written in desperate handwriting. Some were scratched out. Others had notes beside them. Called back, too late, he took her. And then I found my name. Anemone Rise. Rule broken 4. Watched. Beneath it, a single line. Only the girl in blue can open the door. I closed the book. My hands trembled. The girl in the hospital gown. The one I gave the lollipop to. She had to be here. Somewhere. I stepped back into the hallway, turning toward the pediatric wing. The lights dimmed with each step. Shadows lengthened. I passed rooms with doors half opened, and inside were things I couldn't bear to describe. Patients with faces blurred like smeared photographs. Nurses with empty sockets where eyes should be. A man who pounded his head against a window that showed him the reflection of someone else. When I reached the pediatric ward, it was bathed in cold blue light. The walls were covered in crayon drawings, some childlike and happy, others chaotic spirals in red and black. The air smelled like candy and formaldehyde. She stood at the end of the hallway, the girl in the blue gown, barefoot, hair matted, eyes too old for her face. She smiled when she saw me. She said softly. I froze. You remember me? You gave me candy. That means you're a good one. She held out her hand. They don't like good ones. I stepped forward and took her hand. Her skin was cold and papery, like holding a doll soaked in winter. Can you open the door? I asked. She didn't answer, just turned and led me through the twisting halls. We passed things I don't want to remember. Doctors without mouths, patients who crawled across the ceilings, surgical tables that bled. All of them watched us. None approached. The girl seemed to keep them away. Finally, we reached an old elevator. It didn't belong to any floor I knew. Its buttons were all blank. The doors opened before we touched them. Inside, the walls were lined with mirrors, broken, cracked, smeared with words written in something red. The girl stepped in. I hesitated, then followed. As the doors closed, the elevator dropped, but not like a machine. It fell, fast, violent. I couldn't scream. The pressure crushed my lungs. The girl didn't move. After a moment, the lights cut out, and when they returned, we weren't in the hospital anymore. We stood in a wide circular room made of black stone, no windows, no doors, but in the center was a single chair, the same rusted wheelchair. The girl let go of my hand and stepped back. I can't go further, she whispered. Why not? I asked. He's here. I turned slowly toward the chair. It was empty. Then it wasn't. The man from room 333 was sitting there, the one with the black eyes and perfect smile. Hello again, he said. His voice was louder here, clearer. It vibrated through the floor and into my bones. You broke the rules, he said, rising from the chair. You called me. I didn't, I said. I didn't mean to. But you did, he said, and now you're mine. He took a step toward me. The walls around us pulsed. I felt my memories slipping, my apartment, my job, my name, like he was pulling them away, thread by thread. I want to leave, I said. You were never meant to stay, he replied. But you didn't leave on time, and now you belong to the night. I backed away. The girl stood behind me now, holding something in her hand, a lollipop. She placed it in my palm. Give it to him, she whispered. I turned and held it out. The man stopped. He looked down at the candy, his face twisted, not in fear, in rage. You little witch, he snarled at her. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing faintly blue. You made the rules, she said, and you have to follow them too. He roared. The walls cracked, the chair exploded into dust, and then he vanished. The room faded, and I was back. In the hospital, in the real hallway. It was morning. The sun rose through the windows, casting golden light across the floor. I checked my watch. 6:10 a.m. I was late again, but the doors were back, the lights were normal, and I was holding the girl's lollipop in my hand. When I stepped outside that morning, the world felt wrong. The light of the rising sun should have felt warm, comforting, but it didn't. It felt artificial, like stage lighting meant to give the illusion of safety. I kept walking toward my car, head low, gripping the lollipop in my fist like a talisman. As I reached the driver's seat and closed the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I flinched. My reflection was delayed, just by a second, but it was enough. I ripped the mirror off and threw it in the glove box. By the time I got home, I collapsed on the couch without even taking off my shoes. I must have passed out because when I opened my eyes, the room was dark and the clock said 8:12 p.m. I hadn't set an alarm. I never meant to go back that night. But something had drawn me awake. The lollipop was still in my hand, and there was something written on the wrapper now, in neat, looping handwriting. Finish it. The rules hadn't just been meant to protect me. They were part of a game, a curse, a system, and I was tangled in it now. I drove back to the hospital. Against every instinct, I drove. When I arrived, the front lobby was brightly lit, freshly cleaned, with cheerful music playing softly from the speakers. A new nurse at the reception desk smiled at me like nothing had ever happened. Welcome back, Emily, she said. Rough few days? I stared at her. You remember me? She tilted her head. Of course. You're the only night nurse we've had all week. That was a lie. I'd met Karen. I'd seen Elisa. I'd seen others too, some that I wasn't sure had ever been alive. I need to speak to the charge nurse, I said. Sure thing. She typed something on her keyboard. Go ahead to the second floor. They're expecting you. Expecting me. That phrase twisted in my gut. I stepped into the elevator, half expecting it to plunge into the black void again. But it rose smoothly, dinged on each floor. I walked to the nurse's station on the second floor. No one was there. Just a clipboard with my name on it. Underneath, written in red ink, final shift. I stood still for several minutes, unsure whether to cry, scream, or run. But then I turned the page. There was a new list. Not of rules, of names. Each one crossed out except the last one. Emily Rise, incomplete. And beneath that, another note. He's not the only one watching. I began my rounds. The halls were quiet, but the lights flickered more than usual. Room 304 was open now. The door creaked slowly as I passed. Inside, a woman sat in the bed. She was impossibly old. Skin like yellow parchment, eyes clouded with age, lips moving with silent prayers. But when she saw me, she spoke clearly. You must finish it, dear, she said, or he'll stay. Who is he? I asked. The one who breaks the rules but makes others follow them. I didn't understand. You have to rewrite them, she whispered. That's how the cycle ends. A new set, a new keeper. I took a step into the room. She smiled. Careful now. You've already stayed too long. I turned away. My footsteps echoed louder than usual, almost like someone else was walking with me. When I returned to the nurse's station, there was a journal waiting. Black leather, like the one I'd seen in the hidden storage room. But this one was blank. No names, no rules, just a single sentence on the first page. Write the new ones, and don't look behind you. I nearly did, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up a pen, and I began. New rules for the night nurse, St. Augustine Medical Center. 1. Do not trust what you see in mirrors. They remember you now. 2. If you hear someone humming a lullaby, walk away and count to 33. Do not hum along. 3. The girl in blue is your guide, but never ask her name. 4. The man in the wheelchair has questions you must never answer. 5. If room 333 opens again, leave something of yourself behind. It's the only way out. 6. Finish your shift before the clock stops, or time becomes a loop. 7. The elevator on the west wing leads to the past. Use it only if you're ready to lose who you are. 8. If someone who looks like you speaks to you, run. 9. When you hear the knock on the supply room door, do not breathe until it stops. 10. Never stop writing the rules. They are what keep the others out. As I finished the last one, I felt it. The air shifted, the lights above me steadied, the static in the walls calmed, and then I heard footsteps. Soft ones. She appeared beside me again, the girl in the blue gown. You wrote them? She said with a proud smile. Does that mean it's over? I asked. She shook her head. It means it's your turn now. She placed a folded piece of paper in my hand. It was the old list, the 10 rules that had kept me alive, but they were now burned through at the edges, faded. The girl began to fade, too, like mist pulled back by sunlight. Will I forget this? I asked. Yes, she said. Eventually. She was almost gone, but the hospital won't. The last thing I saw were her eyes, sad, ancient, full of things no child should ever have to carry. Then I was alone, again. The next night, a new nurse arrived, young, smiling, clueless. I handed her a fresh sheet of paper. Here, I said. Read these. Follow them exactly. She looked at me confused. What is this? Your guide, I replied. And your warning. She chuckled. Is this some weird hazing tradition? I didn't laugh. You'll see. As she walked away, I returned to the nurse's station, picked up the journal, turned to the next page, and began writing again, because I couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. It's strange how fast this place changes you. When I first stepped into St. Augustine Medical Center, I thought I was just a nurse, a tired woman looking for steady work in a quiet place. I didn't know I'd become something else entirely, a keeper, a watcher. The new night nurse, Jenna, hadn't returned from her second shift. I knew that pattern all too well. That's how it starts. The first night is quiet. The second night, the cracks appear. By the third, if you don't follow the rules, you're part of the walls. I wrote her name down in the journal on a page marked monitors. Her name didn't vanish, not yet. That meant there was still hope. But the hospital had already taken interest in her. The night after Jenna vanished, the clock stopped again. Everything froze at 2:33 a.m., and this time I was ready. I had rewritten the rules, I had created boundaries, but the darkness didn't care. It only changed its mask. That night, I walked the halls and saw faces I shouldn't have. Karen standing in front of the mirrorless wall, her reflection staring without her. Elisa crouched in room 304, eyes like oil wells, whispering things in a voice that belonged to no one. They weren't alive anymore, but they weren't dead either. The hospital traps memories. People become echoes here, fragments in the halls, walking their final loops. And me, I was still whole, but barely. I passed the old ICU ward, now sealed off by rusted chains. A place no one had spoken of, yet every door groaned at me as I passed, begging to be opened. The shadows behind the glass didn't blink. I returned to the nurse's station at 4 a.m. and found a note waiting, in a handwriting I didn't recognize. You've lasted longer than the rest, but we all have our shift limits. There was no signature, only a smear of ash beneath it. I placed the note in the journal. Page 79. That was the rule now. Every message becomes part of the book. The book keeps me safe. The lights above buzzed violently, then died. The hospital went black, but I didn't move. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of night come alive, scratching on the floor tiles, soft breathing in my ear. The shuffle of something crawling on the ceiling. I counted 1, 2, 3. By the time I reached 33, the lights flickered back on. The shadows ran, and I remained, but I was weaker now. My bones ached with cold. My memories slipped like sand through a sieve. I kept the book close to remember who I was, what I was doing. Without it, I was just another echo. The girl in blue appeared again at 5:40 a.m., minutes before sunrise. She looked older, worn, fading faster. I can't protect you much longer, she said. I know, I told her. You'll need to find a replacement. My heart twisted at the thought. How do I choose? You don't, she replied. The hospital does. That was when I realized this place didn't need rules to survive. It needed someone to write them, someone to believe in them. The rules were a leash, a cage for chaos, and I had become the one holding the lock. But the key, that was gone long ago. When the sun rose, I left the building. The next morning, I went to my old apartment and packed my things. Photos, clothes, anything that reminded me of before. None of it felt real. It was like trying to dress a ghost. I didn't even recognize my own handwriting on the calendar. The hospital was my home now. It was part of me, and I was part of it. That night, I returned for what I thought would be just another shift. But as I entered the lobby, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A new night nurse. A man this time. Late 20s. Confident posture. Clipboard in hand. He smiled at me. "I'm the new hire," he said. "You're Emily, right?" I nodded slowly. He glanced around. "Place is quiet. They say night shifts here are easy." I reached into my pocket and handed him a folded piece of paper. 10 rules. A fresh set, not the original ones, not even the ones I had written for myself. These were his. Personalized. The hospital had dictated them to me in whispers, in dreams. He looked confused. "Is this a joke?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the west wing, where the mirrorless hallway waited. Behind me, I heard the elevator ding. The doors closed. His shift had begun, and mine had ended. Almost. At 2:33 a.m., I sat at the old nurse's station and opened the black journal one final time. I turned to the last page. The book was full now. Names, rules, memories. Truths that couldn't be spoken aloud. At the bottom of the page, new words appeared before my eyes, etched in glowing white ink. "Thank you, Emily. You've served your shift." I let the book fall shut. The chair creaked beneath me. The lights flickered. And then, nothing. They say no one knows what happened to me. Some say I walked out and never came back. Some say I went crazy and locked myself in the ICU, muttering about rules and children in blue gowns. But the nurses whisper another rumor, one they only say once the sun sets. That if you walk down the east corridor at exactly 2:33 a.m., you might see a figure sitting at the nurse's desk. She doesn't speak. She just watches. And if you're lucky, she'll hand you a list. 10 rules. Your only chance. Follow them exactly, or you'll meet the one who doesn't follow any. And if you're really unlucky, you'll be the one handing out the rules next.